That is not the karakia. Manawa mai te Māori nui. Manawa mai te Māori rā. He Māori kaio, he Māori rā. O whakaru mai te pō, tau mai tū te Māori. Ki runga, ki rawi, ki waho, ki roko. Haumero, ki roko.
Kai ki.
No mai, hoki mai ki Otākou Whakaihu Waka. No mai ki tēnei raupapa taka kōrero. Ki tēnei wā, e tāna te rakahau Māori. Ki te whakapānui ngā whakaharo, e tāna ngā whaikaha. Tēnei te mihi ki te kaupapa, tēnei te mihi ki te hākori whaikaha. Tēnei te mihi ki te kai kōrero, ka hara mai ki te kaupapa. Ki te aku, te hāpaitia, te hauora o te hākori whaikaha. Nō reira tēnei te mihi. He mihi hoki ki te manawhenua o Otīpohi, te whānau o whaikaha, rapi wai, tāpū hāwea, tāpū mai. Tēnā rā koutou. He mihi hoki ki ngā hapu o tēnei rohi. He rua hiki hiku, kāti moki, kauka, whaikitepaka, kāti huiraka, me kāti hāpia. Tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia koutou i te whare, tēnā koutou, ki ngā kai whakarongo, Kairangahou te eturangi, tēnā rā koutou katoa. We are huge greetings to you all. Whakaihu Waiana te katoa. I am one of the taumahi, Kaiaromatawai, one of the researchers and of the Donald Beasley Institute, and I've been given the privilege to chair this very first wonderful seminar of a four-part series that have been brought to you by Otākou Whakaihu Waka, by the University of Otago, and strongly supported by a number of people, and particularly the Donald Beasley Institute, which is where I work at the moment as well as Otākou Whakaihu Waka. So wearing, like many of you, and also the amazing people with Ruth, for kaupapa kiki tēnei kaupapa. So this is the very first of the four-part series. Thanks to the Critical Disability Research Network. This is our November series, and this is the first time, Bridget, that we are running this series. So hopefully, if you like it, please let them know, and more can happen. We are so thrilled. We've had so many people register for this series, and particularly for today. So obviously, it's needed, and it's good timing. So and the network cannot thank all those participants, yourselves, as well as our speakers, any more than we just are so grateful for you to see that this is an important kaupapa as well, and turn up and register. So, and that's why we're getting a lot of people interested in this. So, a few health and safety and a few changes, because we go with the flow. We go with the flow, and this is life, isn't it? So, just for those people who are on Zoom, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat group, and we will try and get them to our speakers if we run over time, because it's really hard when you've got a series of speakers, because always when you get to the last lot, they get the less time. So we're trying to be fair and even for everybody. So when we get through our first one, we're going to try and stick to our time. And then if we run out of time for the question and answers, or the question time, we're going to make sure that we record them, and this is being recorded, but we record those questions, and we might take them to our speakers personally for them to respond. And we'll find a way to get that back out to you, some of those answers. If we have plenty of time, we're just going to roll with those question and answers and get that in. But to allow for our last lot of speakers to have their time as well, we're just going to judge it as we go. And some of our timing is that we've got some people that have to head back home. So that's why we need to also make sure we fit this all in within their time as well. So let's get on to our first two speakers. So you might have read that we're going to do individual presentations. We don't work like that. We work collaboratively. So they have changed it, and they've even changed the title of their speech or their kōrero today, their presentation, which I really, really love. And so the title of this first lot of speakers is called E Toru Ngā Mea. You may have heard that in a way. E Toru Ngā Mea, shaping our hopes, our beliefs and love for our community. And they'll elaborate more on it. So I'd like to introduce Louise Were, Rongo Whakaata, Ngāti Tūwhari Toa, Ngāti kahu, ngāti whāao, 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 whāao. You can probably say it much better than I can. Scotland, I can say that. In her work as a Māori evaluator, Louise brings together a Māori worldview, evaluation and systems thinking. Louise picked up the tools of evaluation as a young mother in the 90s, navigating systems with her daughter who lived as a fierce, I love that term, fierce young Māori disabled woman. Louise has completed the postgraduate diploma in social sector evaluation research and has spent more than 10 years working in service to communities and kaupapa. Having also completed her master's thesis exploring how we can action the capacity of aroha for positive change through evaluative leadership, Louise is now on a PhD journey to collaboratively realise what an evaluation ecosystem can look like with, for and led by disabled people and whānau. Louise will share her reflections on what it will take to realise evaluation ecosystems that are disabled person and whānau led in this current political environment. And she will do that alongside her supervisor, who is also going to jump into this kōrero, and they've blended their two kōrero together. So it is also with privilege to introduce at the same time Dr. Kirsten Smiler, the aitanga a māhaki, rongo whakaata as well, and whakatōhia. Kirsten is a senior lecturer of the Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Her expertise includes kaupapa, huge amount of expertise, but we'll start with these ones, includes kaupapa Māori research within deaf communities and research related to health and wellbeing. Your master's was at Victoria University, looked at critically examined perceptions of cultural and linguistic identity for Māori, and members of the New Zealand Sign Language community. Then she went on to complete her PhD, a study of the nature and impacts of early intervention for Māori deaf, hearing impaired children and their whānau. So, and then also she is now the manutaki takirua for the Hikuwai Rangahau Hauora, and serves as a Māori advisor to the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening and Early Intervention Program, and acts as a New Zealand Sign Language board member. So huge amount of skills right here. So I'm going to hand this over to them now for a 40-minute joint presentation with a bit of time for question and answers after that. No reira, ho mai te paki.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Tēnā koe Umi, we can break what's in.
Oh, kia ora.
Ai.
Hello. Let's go again. Kia ora. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Pai.
Hapai.
So tahi, he rā pia ka mōhio whānau e tēnei waiata e toru ngā mea. Kei te tika pia ki te whakahokia ki tēnei waiata, me waiata tātou, kia hono ki te nako o te kōrero kei roto i tēnei waiata. Nā reira, me waiata tahi ai tātou. Māku I tīmata. Kia ora. So if you know the song, please join in. I'm pretty certain many of you will. I even know there's a well-known NZSL interpretation for this waiata, which I hope the interpreters will have some familiarity with. Oh, pai ana. Māku e tū ana ki te, I'll sign it as well.
Ka
pai.
E toru ngā mea nunui, e ki ana, te pai pera, tūmana ko, whakapono, ko te mea nui, ko te aroha.
Kia ora. How do we turn the slides over? Is there... Oh, kia ora.
Hi.
Okay. Hei aku.
Me wehe ki te atua, me whakahonore te ariki nui kuini ngā waihono I te pō. Ngā mana whenua, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ngā huhua o te wā, haere, haere, haere atu rā. E mātua māka, e whaia Pauline, moi mai rā. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rangatira, e ngā karanga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. Hōai au, a he mokopuna ahau, ki te taho tōku kraua, ko tongariro te maunga, ko te tauponui te moana, ko te hiuhiu te tangata, ki te taho tōku kuia, ko ki tapu te maunga, ko arai tiri te awa, ko rongo whakaata tiwi. Ki te taho o tōku karani mā, rawa ko karani pā, no potirana hoki. Ko wai au, he māmā hau. Ko Braisha rātou, ko Peta, ko Brandon o ku tamariki, ko Brent wea taku ho rangatira mō Ngāti Manoa ia. Ko wai au, he Kaiaromatawai ahau, ko Louise Moana wea ahau. Tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou katoa. My heartfelt thanks for you all to come today. A tinana, a hui topa, tēnei te mihi aroha ki a tātou. I also want to thank Otākou Whakaihu Waka, our Donald Beasley Institute whānau, and all my tuakana that are presenting today and throughout the series. Thank you for all making today and the series possible. My name is Louise Were. I was gifted the name yesterday. My sign name is Louise. Kia ora mo te tuakana. I'm a moko baby born and raised on the shores of Te Rotorua Nui a Kahumata Momoi, or Lake Rotorua, at the feet of my 4 grandparents, who hail from Ngāti Tūwhare Toa, Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whaoa, Ngāti Rongo Whakaata and Scotland. I'm the wife to Brent and mother to Braisha, Peta and Brandon. What was the karanga that brought us here today? As Kelly mentioned, in 1993, I got the privilege of becoming a mum. Brent and I, my husband was 16 at the time, and we welcomed our first baby girl, Braisha Kataraina Te Aomarama, to us. She was born 12 weeks early, and at that time, she didn't come through that unscathed. Hoi anō, as again Kelly, she was fierce, she was sassy, she was a wild young Māori disabled woman. We had the privilege of being her mama and papa for 26 years a whenua. She's our anahera now, and she's the reason for being here for us and for the work that we do. And yeah, we spent lots of time navigating systems, but learning and growing together about how we can find voice, find language, help people to listen, arongo, in all the ways we can know, to enable Braisha to be clear about what her life needs to look like, and for us as a whānau. So today I come as mokopuna, I come as wahine, as tamahine, as mama, as whānau, as hoa haere, as an ally, as Kaiaromatawai. All the things that I'm yet to remember and yet to emerge, I come perfectly imperfect, of service, and forever grateful for the generous spirit. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a tātou.
Kia ora koutou, ko wai au, he ko okahu ai tū te maunga, ko repongare te roto, ko tākitamu te waka, ko te whānau kai te iwi. Kia ora. Anei tētahi pikitia o tōku whānau, te whānau Kirsten Smiler. This is me and my whānau. I don't know if you can spot them as a Where's Wally picture. Oh, you get a special spot price chocolate fish at the end of the presentation if you can figure out where I am. And that's our marae rongopai. I whakapapa, as Kelly mentioned earlier, I whakapapa to a number of marae hapu around the East Coast region, connecting myself to te whakatohia, rongo whakaata, and whanau ākai te atanga mahaki hoki. Koira te whakapapa e tōku o tōku papa, that's my dad's side. And you probably get 3 chocolate fishes if you can figure out which one is my dad. We all kind of look similar. Ai, koira tōku whānau. E te tau tōku māma, kei te whakapapa hau ki ngā whenua kotirana. So on mum's side, I whakapapa to Scotland, and my grandparents came here in the 1950s to raise their 8 children. And interestingly enough, I found that very recently, my whakapapa to this whenua, well, not whakapapa to the whenua, but my connection to this whenua is I had some great-great-great-grandparents who came in the late 1800s on the Tweed and came through to this region. So that was a fun fact that I accidentally learnt very recently, which is interesting. And they came from Cork. Yeah, kia ora. So that's my whānau. I tēnei wā, he Kairangahou Māori. I'm a Māori researcher at Victoria University, or me ki the Herenga Waka, otherwise known, also now commonly referred to as the Herenga Waka, to my great delight. And as Kelly mentioned, my background in Rangahau. And I come to this space as a whanaunga too, with my whanaunga here. We've got both. We just, happen to find out, oh, kia ora, Kazi from Rongo Whakata. You're probably related to our kotira and whakapapa too. So, everyone's closer than what we think we are in Aotearoa. So that's what brings me here. So what brings me here into this kaupapa is through my mum. So my mum is profoundly deaf, and so is her brother. And so we grew up in the era where New Zealand Sign Language wasn't commonly, what's the word? Well, I'm a Generation X. And so when I was young, there were no interpreters, but sign language was our home language, and that was my first language. And then as we got a bit older, sign language became, I'll talk about it in a bit later about my why I'm here. But yeah, so that's how I ended up doing rangahau, and this sort of space between te ao Māori and te ao Ture, between Māori and deaf communities. Yeah. So that's me. So Lou and we had individual presentations, which we debriefed one another on yesterday afternoon, and then we just thought we'd let our creativity flow. So we've decided to take a different approach today. We hope you like it, and it's a bit more engaging and enjoyable, and probably speaks to hinga kaupono, our true selves. So we're going to put our more authentic selves out today, and hopefully that brings out some stimulates people to think. But I'll hand it over to Lou, and Lou will talk a bit more about our approach today. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So yeah, I guess we wanted to in real time demonstrate how mihi mihi, as Kirsten's referred to, is a real beautiful tikanga that we have, a practice that we have to allow us in our rangahau and Aromatawai spaces, our research and evaluation, to come together to build connections, find connections, understand, build insight. And we wanted to demonstrate that in real time, and how we can do that and support, as Kirsten's referred to, help plant some kākano for you all to take away, and think about how we might action those things, because I guess that's the beauty of kaupapa Māori, and being able to create spaces like this. Our wānanga, we've created a space where we can come together and have our own internal processes for making sense of things, while we can share and deliberate collectively to gain understanding. And so we wanted to take that opportunity with you all today. And in wānanga, our wānanga, Kirsten and I will share a few things about our journey through as Kairangahou, Kaiaromatawai. Yeah.
Oh, we also suggested that on the chat. So if people want to, if you have an epiphany, a partai,
we're also thinking about people online. So we just thought, if you have an epiphany, a partai, a question, a comment, if you just want to put something in the chat, and then towards the end we can integrate that as part of our wānanga, because we can't see you, but we can feel you.
Yeah. Even if you wanted to, Umi, have the chat bar up. Yeah, we'll try really hard to view them as we go as well.
Okay. Thank you, Umi.
Māku e tīmata?
Te pātai tōtahi?
Māku.
Kia.
Ai.
Oh, kaina.
Okay. We can move forward now. So again, e tori ngā mea, we have 3 pātai that we are going to kōrero about today. He pātai tuatahi, Ōtakou tuakana. Tell us how you came to this space, Kirsten.
So I'm just reflecting on this. My dad always says that when people live a life, it's like they've written a book. And then when you go to tangihanga, people pull out the book and they read chapters from the book. They share stories about who they are, who was the character in the book, and who were the main people who influenced the development of that character. And so in some ways I see myself quite deeply tied to a specific book. And the book is the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary. When I was a little girl, New Zealand Sign Language was our home language, but at the time, I think in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a social stigma attached to New Zealand Sign Language. But interestingly, within the community itself, there was this deep pride and I don't know if resistance is the right word. I'll sit on that. I'm not sure exactly what the kupu is, but a fierce aroha for our language. And I experienced alongside my siblings and through my mother the discrimination that we felt through society. So, for example, if at that time there were no New Zealand Sign Language interpreters, they weren't a workforce, they didn't exist. And so the majority of interpreting responsibility lay with family members. So as young children, my older sister and I, we were it. So we would have to shadow our parent and do the interpreting for her, much like how people do with if you come to Aotearoa and you speak another language other than English. And so we experienced the discrimination alongside her. And I know that we weren't deaf, but we definitely experienced it. And there was a deep mamai, deep pain that we experienced when you see your parent being discriminated against. The koira te aroha, koira te menui. So yeah, the way I'm tied back to that book is that life continues on as you do as a young child. You live your best life. You go to primary school, you eat your Marmite sandwiches, and in my case, it was Marmite and lettuce. You master the bars, and you practice your red books and green books and all those things. So that's part of that story. But in addition to that, I remember something happening in our family, and what it was is my mum bought a blue and black jacket, and it was her good jacket, and she would go to Wellington. It was a very proper sort of jacket, and she would participate. It was the first proper jacket I remember seeing her wear, and she would participate in the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary recording research whangahau, and didn't really know what she was doing. I said, "Where are you going?" She said, "Oh, we're going to a meeting." And basically she and her friends in the community were filmed, and that film footage formed the basis of the analysis for the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary. And so my perspective of the dictionary is a different understanding. It's through the perspective of a child, of an adult, to see the transition of that person, to see how they evolved in terms of their understanding of their own language, to see them become affirmed that actually what they're doing is actually language. It is something that is normal, because for so long we were considered to be abnormal. And so that was really affirming. So I guess in some ways I could see the transformative impact of research. I lived the transformative impact of research. I have, you know, forever grateful for those people who led the work and continue to lead the work for the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary. So that's how I, if I'm being honest, I'm part of that book. And my understanding of the transformative praxis of kaupapa Māori goes back to this whole experience of being part of the development of a dictionary, but through the eyes of a child who participated, of a parent who participated in research. And so for many, many years, I've been deeply curious and reflective about something that I could never give language to. And now that I've travelled a journey through academia, the word that I'm looking for is epistemic violence. So, and that occurs in different contexts and different domains. So yes, of course, I thought about that in relation to New Zealand Sign Language. How do you know what you know? You know, that's epistemology. I was thinking about the epistemic violence of mainstreaming had a deep impact on certain groups. As a parallel journey to that, I was in the 80s, early 90s. I was one of the first, oh no, I wasn't one of the first. I participated in one of the first bilingual units in my community. So I grew up in Puriroa. And so as a Māori, my mother's her whakapapa is to Scotland, and my mother was deeply supportive of my participation in a bilingual unit, even though she herself was Pākehā. So for her, she was always really affirming. She was always like, well, you know, he Māori koe, like you're Māori, so you should learn te reo Māori. That's a good thing for you to do. And so in some ways I had a sense of stigma and shame in terms of my inability to speak te reo Māori, but then I also recognised that, you know, being Māori wasn't always that cool. And so I was inspired by her strength and thought, yeah, no, this is the good thing to do, even though, you know, there was a bit of shaming that was going on around the periphery in my social network of why would you go to that bilingual school to learn te reo Māori? Like, you don't need te reo Māori, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in this space. So really through aroha, deep aroha for whakapapa, for whānau, for community and for language and mātauranga. And I think the other thing is, because we've got e tōru ngā mea, we've got 3 pātai and 3 responses to that pātai, so that's 2. And my third one, which I think I've illuminated through my kōrero, is the intergenerational impact of our rangahau, so that you can have a really deep impact on people in their communities that can ricochet down many generations. I mean, I remember in 2006 when I went to Parliament for the NZSL Act when that was passed, and yeah, the significance of that moment, you know, was really profound. That within my lifetime, I'd been a child who had been raised in a language that wasn't even recognised as a language. It wasn't even, you know, what are you doing? That's not language. To experiencing the whole spectrum of feelings around that, and then seeing it, the development of a interpreter workforce, which is really important because that's the bridge across communities and domains into mātauranga, to knowledge, and then finally for it to be recognised and then supported and endorsed through policy, legislation, and importantly resource. So I guess yeah, so that my insight is this intergenerational insight. So koira tōku whakautu mō te mea tuatahi. So that's my first response. So I'll ask Lou, kia koe. What about for you, Lou? How did you come into this space?
Kia ora. I actually came really asleep. I was not present to the space, but becoming a mama awakened me. I had to develop a consciousness that I actually had no platform for. I had gone through life theory, like I just floated on the awa and let it take me and let things happen. And so having to shift and become critical in my thinking and to actually ask questions was fundamental to how we were going to live as a whānau, what Braisha needed from me as her mama. And what she also taught me was how to listen ārongo. So our society would have labelled her as nonverbal, not a communicator. But Braisha had a myriad of ways of communicating with us. She helped us to connect our hinengaro through our minds and through our thinking, through our wairua, through our oro, the vibrations and the senses and the feelings that we, and I still to this day don't have words for, but I know what they feel like. And I had to really hone my skills of listening for her so that I could help others learn how to listen to her. And as a young mama, I also realized my life journey for someone who floated on the awa and let things happen. I wasn't always conscious to becoming a mama. And so as a 16-year-old, holding my pepe, I had also a tohu given to me, that education was freedom. And I had to do things to enlighten myself. And I was always, I had a mamai about why I couldn't hold Braisha for as long as I needed to. Why did she have to come so early as she did? And I remember I had the opportunity, sorry, long story short, took myself back to school as an adult student, went off to extramural study and started exploring preterm birth. And it turns out that we already knew if you're young, if you're Māori, if you're not educated and you've got an unstable environment, you're more likely to have an early baby. I'm like, what? You knew? People knew? What? Why don't we do anything? Why aren't things happening to support wahine like me who are going to potentially, we know they might have their babies early. And so I, through those experiences, wanted to find a way where we were constantly having to be acceptable enough to people to listen to about what was good for us, but also over time knowing that the more and more we could harness our ability to be critical and reflective to take action, the more and more we had the ability, he kai aku ringa, we had the tools and the sustenance in our own selves to be able to lead the change that we wanted to. And so, yeah, I've had the real privilege of growing alongside my children and learning and developing this consciousness that I hope that's one of my big hopes, which actually, as I share with Kirsten, my tamariki are so critical. They are so connected and they are so clear about the things that are important to them that I'm grateful I don't have to worry about my mokopuna. Kia ora tātou. I te tuakana. So thinking about all the things that have drawn us to this space, what guides you in your work as Kairangahou?
Wasn't quite sure where to start for this response. And obviously te taha wairua, there things that guide us that sometimes we don't know that they're even guiding us. So, but I'll come back to that point. So, I guess for me, one of the things that I experienced as a young child is this experience of trying to make sense of the world. So as a child interpreter, you toddle on to somewhere, something, I don't know, it might be something random, going to the bank to make a bank deposit or something along those lines, and then you're having a chat to the bank teller and you're trying to do interpretation for something that you have no schema for. Percentages and interest, like how would you know how to interpret that at the age of 9? Because you didn't necessarily have, we hadn't got percentages yet at primary school, so that was tough. And so it was those sort of experiences, day-to-day experiences, made me realize at a really young age that there are things in the world that reality is not what we think it is sometimes. And there is a lot of received wisdom that we get through society. It's just the way things are. That's communicated in many different ways, and through language, through behavior, through, you know, I was just thinking, walking around town today, thinking about this township looking the way that it does. I thought, you know, there's a structure, a system, a society which has a whole bunch of received wisdom. And when you grow up in a household when that received wisdom is not understood, and then you go out to participate in society, and it's a very confusing experience. But it's pretty clear from a young age, you know, that you're navigating a world that is complex and different to what you think it should be like. I recently watched, has anyone watched Spider-Man recently into the, you have? Metaverse or something. I was dragged along by my sons, who made me go see the most recent version of Spider-Man. Basically it's about alternative universes, and Spider-Man lives in different realities. And I watched it and I thought, yes, I get this. This is definitely something I completely understand. So Whakahoki, I better go back to the question. When we're talking about Spider-Man and alternative universes, te pātai.
Te pātai. What guides you in your
guides, yeah. So that's what guides me, is knowing, being curious, being really, really curious about the things that we take for granted, the received wisdom. Are things, do we properly understand the way the world is? With regards to Māori methodologies or kaupapa Māori methodologies, I'm thinking about experiences of being colonised, and you know, there are sometimes narratives that you just assume to be true, and maybe they're not, and maybe we don't have language for those things, or maybe we need to explore whakapapa in a different kind of way to properly understand a phenomenon. And things can be different. We can be in alternative universes. A problem can be framed in different ways, and that's okay. And when I think about the transformative praxis of kaupapa Māori, through practicing tikanga, through te reo, using te reo, you bring a different epistemology to the problem, understanding to the problem, which means that you can think about solutions in different ways as well. Yeah, so that's kind of one way of thinking about what guides me in my mahi. Of course, there's a sense of social justice, that the world is not fair sometimes for some groups of people. But actually in our response to that, we have to have true aroha, a true focus on our society and systems, and how they're structured, and the epistemic underpinning behind it, our worldview, our ontology. Yeah. Tētahi mea anō, one more thing. Tētahi atu mea. I was just thinking about one of the challenges that I have found working, thinking about intersectionality. So when you think about different systems of oppression and how they work, when I've
been thinking about a kaupapa Māori methodology. Sometimes when you're trying to think about how to undertake research, it's sometimes not clear how those systems intersect, and that can be sometimes a challenge. So just having a lot of time to deeply reflect about and wānanga actually, okay, is this the nature of the problem? Is it really, should we see it in this way, or should we actually be looking at it through a different ontology, epistemology? So sometimes it can be a long withdrawn process and can take a lot of time, discussion, patience, and reflection. And that can sometimes create a bit of pressure when you've got lots of reports to write and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely something that guides me in my mahi. Yeah. So, Lou. Kai a koe, hea te mea huarahi.
Hi.
What's something that guides you in your mahi?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on a little bit from you actually, because our tupuna were curious. They were highly evaluative. We made judgments all the time about what was good for our people or not good for our people. Our atua, as I've come to learn, particularly Hini Kaorohia, is an atua that is centred on introspection and reflection to support us to take action. So in our whakapapa, we have our atua and our tupuna that have demonstrated how to make sense of what's around them to then determine how we be, how we do. And I really wanted to continue to grow my understanding and practice of that, because as I mentioned earlier, I no longer wanted to tolerate seeing the insight and the whakaaro shared from our communities no longer being used or seen as useful or able to be actioned. And so, as I've mentioned, I've found the kupu and the peoples, it turns out, in Kaiaromatawai in evaluation, because the ultimate foundation of evaluations is in the name. It's about values, and we are required to ask what's important and to whom, and to have a real criticality about ensuring that we are developing authentically the insight that can be useful and usable. What it does require of us, all of us, is that step to be really clear with ourselves is how far are we prepared to advocate and for activism, because that's actually, for many of us, why we come into this space, is not to know for the sake of knowing, but to know to contribute to action and change. And so, yeah, again, aloha, aroha is a really positive, disruptive force in our practice, and how I've come to learn that actually that our deep love for our communities and our kaupapa is actually how the activism comes out in our mahi. We just have to be really clear about that. Te whanaunga o tahi miniti. Aue, nā. Ka pai? Pai ana. Kia ora koe. Aira. Ai. Oi o ko tahi pātai. Ai. Māku?
Aroha mai. Ia tētahi mea hau i ako ana i tō huarahi haerenga.
Ai, I roti te.
What's something new you've learned
Ka pai.
through your mahi?
Yeah, and I think a little extension to that pātai is things that I have learnt to give effect to kaupapa Māori and uphold the rights and aspirations of whānau haua, of tāngata whaikaha. I think that, again, can't go too far beyond aro ki te hā, a love and deep respect for our people, that for place, for kaupapa, I have figured out that I arongo in all the ways that we know, seek to respond to the karanga that people have that are driving them, the things that are really deep in their poku about what's important to them. And if I can be of service and offer, then that's what I do. I'm also really, I try to be really pono with myself and others about when I don't think I should be in a space. I encourage people to rōpū to first, through whanaungatanga, we can figure out whether we're a good fit for each other. And that's okay if we're not. Pai ana. Not that we're a big group of people, but there's lovely Māori evaluators, many of them that we can call on, or our wider evaluation community of practice who may have the skills and talents that support you. I think that's really important. And again, never going alone. I learned really early on in my practice that, oh yeah, it's like Superman. It's like powers combined. That's my little mantra that has really served me well, which means I can serve our communities and our kaupapa well, and have such the honour and privilege to learn alongside. And this is the other thing, tuakana taina, being able to be in roles where I'm alongside and learning, and then the next moment I might be sharing the pukenga and skills and talents I have for others to learn. We do that in our teams, we do that with our whānau and our communities. And I guess that's part of the tikanga of always wanting to be reciprocal, always wanting to share what we have. And ultimately, just heard the last bit of actually my bio about this current environment, and I guess I just wanted to recognise that we just have to be clear with ourselves about the positions we take. We have to recognise that while we all have pukenga to share, I don't have to be the expert. Our communities are the experts. They might not that everyone wants to be an evaluator. that would be my dream world, but there are skills and talents that can support our kaupapa for transformation that we can share and grow the capability within our communities. We don't have to be dependent on others. Kia ora tātou. Oh, yeah, what have you learned?
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, kia ora.
Yeah, you got time.
Oh, not really. We've got a bit of time. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna do my quick review of things that I wish someone had told me a few years ago. So when I first started as a MA student, I was quite diligent, and I went to the library because we didn't do the interweb in those days, and trawled through books about methodology, and read a lot. And I remember sitting with a whaia, the late Tai Walker from Ngāti Porou. She was Ngāti Kāpō as well, and we used to have marathon wānanga on a couch just outside our offices, and she said to me, what's your epistemology? I was, my what? Well, I read in so and so this, that, the other thing, and then and then so therefore that's an inductive and methodology, blah blah blah, and so so I had read a lot and thought about how to basically I was trawling the books for a recipe, trying to figure out what is the recipe that I was supposed to be using in my research. And She said, but yeah, no, but what's your one? And then I was like, I don't know. And then I felt really dumb. So I had to spend a few years thinking about that. I mean, I wrote the things that I had read in textbooks, and yeah, I guess one of the things I learned that day is actually challenging a received wisdom that you should go to the library and read a book and think about things, which is not a bad thing to do. Definitely there's, you know, sharing of mātauranga in those spaces, but actually to encourage those people who come from knowledge systems which aren't in those books, like, you know, you think about mātauranga Māori, thinking about knowledge that comes from sign languages, that sometimes you have to go back to those communities to think through questions around epistemology and methodology. And so sometimes for myself, when I was thinking about, okay, what's the methodology here, I always knew it's a bit of a chicken and eggs situation. You might not know the partai, you might not know the research question, but you absolutely know the method, or you know the methodology, but you don't know why you know that that's the right thing to do. You just cause, and cause is not good enough in a thesis. So, and I mean, when your auntie says cause, or your mum says just cause, do it now, just because. And so for me, like, there was this process of deep reflection and thinking about epistemic violence and thinking about, you know, ways that other language communities have been excluded from the academy. So that's one thing I wish someone had told me, but I'm not even sure if someone told me if I would have got that memo, to be honest. So I think I had to live that journey to fully understand that. So there was that. Yeah, so what's first, chicken or egg? Partai me te huarahi, the question or the method. Sometimes you do a bit of a dance between the two. You know the question, but don't know the method. You know the method, you don't know the question. We need to do the method to figure out your question was wrong. So there's those sorts of things. And then the last thing was around voice and audience. So as an academic, we're encouraged to do, you know, the international conference thing, present at conferences, share knowledge with other people. And while that's a really valuable experience, and I definitely have learnt a lot through those processes, the most profound experiences I've had are in community spaces. I'm petrified when we have to go to the marae and present to the marae, or to the aunties, or to the cousins, or to communities, because they are the real critics. They can really chop you down at the knees, and and that's good. And I think they need to, because we need to be careful about what we do. You can do some harm to people, and that's not good. Yeah. So when I'm thinking about research methodology, I'm thinking about one thing I wish people had told me was that, yes, these things are important. It is important to come today and to kōrero to you wonderful people, to share mātauranga, but also to think about ways that this is accessible, or think about ways that I could do the same kōrero in a community who may not be inclined to watch this on Zoom. So I challenge everybody to think about that more broadly in their own work, and think about who are important audiences in your mahi. And sometimes you have to do a bit of groundwork in the community to get your foot in the door, to be able to say, hey, can I come here and wānanga with you all? Ai, so koira te kōrero whakamutunga.
I've done that.
Yeah. He waiata?
Ka pai.
Tētahi waikurunga
Oh, ajima.
Kia ora, everyone. I think we've run out of time. Oh, you want to? Oh,
Ka
kātai. Oh, kia ora. Do you want to? I'll read.
Pai.
Karen, I'll read it out. Pēnā koutou katoa. This is for the interpreters. A huge ngā mihi to the presenters. I feel hugely privileged to be listened to today. Kaupapa Māori and mātauranga Māori is important for whānau Māori, but also for all of us. I acknowledge the speaker in her process of awakening herself. Beautiful kōrero, and included a valuable illustration how Western medicine withholds knowledge from people. What is not said or shared. Frustrating and disempowering. I admire your thinking, reflection, and practice around research, participation, and process. Kia ora. Tērā pia he comment. Yeah. I think she's talking to you.
Oh.
Koira te mea, the awakening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me whakaita.
Oh, ka pai. O tēnei te mihi aroha ki a koe, Jane. Yeah, I think that this is what's actually going through my head is keep being a nohi whānau, like keep asking the questions. And the other thing is really, does it have to be like that? You know, I think that, yeah, I just mihi to you, Jane, to us all about the things that we have to navigate. And as my girl would say, is that all you got? Come on. So, yeah.
Come on with a question. Got one on. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Zoom people.
Oh.
Oh, there we go.
Kapai, Chris will get that to you.
Some shoes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Kia ora, Carolyn. Carolyn was instrumental in supporting Brasher in her life, supporting us as a whānau. Tēnei te mihi aroha ki a koe e hoa. Ngā mihi.
From the floor.
Happy both.
Well,
Kia ora, Jane.
nei rā te mihi. I'm just going to try. Oh, I'm going to go down on my knees. Look at this. It is. It feels like I'm going to propose to you both. I can do this. I do yoga. So nei rā te mihi kia korua mō tō kōrero a tāhua e pāna o korua mahi me tō korua ora, me tō whānau hoki, me tō korua haerenga. It's a real privilege because it is all about our authentic selves. You know, there is no, now I'm a researcher, now I'm a mama. I think I overshare in order to connect and whakawhanaungatanga, but it has held me well. And we've, you know, we've been in this for a long time, and you know, research is about whakapapa, and we sometimes go against ethics and we do it on purpose in some ways because the ethics isn't for us, some of the ethical processes, and it's a different set of values behind the ethics. So we struggle with that a bit as Māori researchers. But I really loved your comments, aro ki te hā, you know, that's so beautiful. But also your kōrero around love is a disruptive force. I think so much. Someone asked me the other day about, you know, some of those values, and I said, you need to look into the word aroha, you know, so much in that meaning. So I challenge all those online to look at these words, aro ki te hā, to look at the word aroha, to look at whakapono, to look at tūmanako, or, you know, those words carry multiple meanings, and they're actually really good frameworks and methodologies in themselves. Activism is our mahi. It's all of our mahi, to activate, to be activated, you know, and we always work in that reciprocal relationship. And it's an ongoing relationship. A lot of the work we do in the communities is also, where the work should actually mimic who we are as people and what we're striving for as well, because we are part of that community as well as being the researcher within that community. So, e toru ngā mea. Stunning. Thank you so much. We are going to take a 5-minute break and to allow you all to stretch, have a cuppa, and we're going to come back. And when we come back, we're going to hear online another wonderful presentation from Tristram Ingham, Bernadette Jones, and Meredith Perry, and with their presentation on Eyes on Disability, tāngata whaikaha, Māori identity, intersectionality, and invisibility. So please take a 5-minute break, and please come back and join us after that. Kia ora koutou, kia ora koutou.
So they have to, oh, they're back to.
Ka pai. Welcome back to the first seminar out of 4, so please join us for all the others as well. Welcome back to those people online. I'm just not sure which camera I'm looking into, but hopefully I'm sharing with our wonderful, there we go, thank you, interpreters, sign language interpreters, Bridie and Tamlin. Thank you very much, Korua, for your beautiful work. Welcome back to the Critical Disability Network's November series, and we're really looking, today's focus is on kaupapa Māori methodologies and research with tāngata whaikaha, of course. And this is a 2-hour seminar series, so we've got a little under an hour to go with trailblazing kaupapa Māori researchers in disability and health. And this seminar, the aim of it is to illustrate how kaupapa Māori methodologies can be used to identify and resolve inequities experienced by tāngata whaikaha, whānau haua, and their whānau. So our next speakers are joining us online, and again, just incredible with their title of their presentation is Eyes on Disability. So we're being joined by Associate Professor Tristram Ingham, Ngāti Kahungunu, ki here taonga, Ngāti Parau. And he is an Associate Professor at the Division of Health Sciences at the University of Otago, Otākou Whakaihu Waka ki Pōnaki in Wellington. His research focuses on health systems, achieving inequity for Māori, and including kaupapa Māori research methodologies or methods within clinical and his research. And also joining him will be Bernadette Jones, Ngāti Wairiki Ngāti Apa, and Bernadette is a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Otago and Director of the Foundation for Equity and Research New Zealand. Her expertise is in Māori health, with clinical, academic and research interest in health equity, including chronic respiratory conditions, health literacy, disability identity and rights, and health and disability service delivery for tamariki, rangatahi and whānau Māori. And sitting alongside them will be also the wonderful Associate Professor Meredith Perry, and she is at the School of Physiotherapy in Wellington. She's an experienced physiotherapist and researcher with expertise in accessible environments and disability research. Please put your hands together for all of these 3 wonderful speakers: Eyes on Disability, Tāngata Whaikaha, Māori Identity, Intersectionality and Invisibility. Paki paki.
Kia ora, Kelly, and thank you very much for your very warm welcome to us. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm just going to open our session with a karakia that binds us all to the kaupapa of Māori with lived experience of disability. Tuia te herenga o te tangata ki tēnei kaupapa. Tuia I runga, raro, roto, waho. Tuia ki ngā tangata whaikaha, kia noho pai ai ki te whenua, kia noho pai ai ki te ao, ki te ao marama, e tauana. Ko kuruhapi te waka, ko whangahū te awa, ko kauangaroa te marae, ko marae huatau te tīpuna, ko Bernadette Jones aho. Kārangarua, kārangamaha. I have many callings. I'm a mama, a nana, I'm a nurse, I'm a Māori health researcher, and I'm tangata whaikaha Māori with lived experience of disability from an injury acquired about 40 years ago while nursing. It is our privilege today, on behalf of our wider team, to present some of the results from the Te Ao Marama Mixed Methods Program of Māori Health, Wellbeing and Disability. And I'll hand over next to Meredith, then Tristram, to introduce themselves. Kia ora, Meredith.
Kia ora, Bernadette. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko remataka tamonga, ko te kairanga toka awa, no te whanganui atau tara ahau, ko Meredith Perry toko ingoa. Hello, I'm Meredith, and it's wonderful to be here with you today, and to my fellow speakers, kia ora Kirsten, kia ora Louise, and of course Bernadette and Tristram. I live in Wellington, below the Rimatakas and alongside the beautiful Kairangi River. What brings me to this work? I am not Māori, but my conscience as a health professional, as a physiotherapist, and my whānau's lived experience of navigating education, health, and social services with my two tamariki who see, understand, and live in a world in their own unique and special way calls me to this really important mahi. Kia ora.
Mahuta ki te pai atu keri ragaraga. Ragaraga ki te pō, ragaraga ki te ao. Ragaraga ki te tuakiri o te tangata. Ki tōna tapu, hihi, wehi, wana, mauri. Ka puta ki te pai au, ki te ao marama, tihei, mauri ora. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko waio, ko takitimu te waka, ko naro te awa, ko Ngāti Kahungunu ki Hiratanga, te iwi, nā tupuro hoki, ko Tristram Ingham ahau. He tangata paikaha Māori ahau. Kia ora whānau, aroha mai for not appearing on camera. I'm a bit mauiwi at the moment, but delighted to be with you today to present as part of this team and lived experience of disability and bring that to my work of the intersectionality of clinical epidemiology, of disability rights and healthcare governance and systems. I too live in Pōneke, and I'll hand back to Bernadette to give an overview of where we're going to go today in our 3 eyes on disability. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tristram. Thank you for that. And there are 2 out of 3 of us today who are recovering from illness. So thank goodness for our friend and colleague Meredith, who can always articulate clearly. Next slide. I'm going to provide just a quick overview. This next slide will provide the quick overview, showing the 3 parts of our presentation: identity, intersectionality, and invisibilisation. And next slide, please. I will start off with identity. And I just want to mihi to our friends and colleagues, Lou and Kirsten, who have so ably set the scene for this from their own perspective and experience of whānau living within their communities. They described it beautifully, and I particularly liked what you said, Kirsten, about how your father described these chapters of a journey of somebody, and this is one of the chapters for us. Next slide. What is a disability identity and the relationship between impairment and disability? Ascribing to the social model of disability, where disability is not a product of the person, but rather the environment and societal attitudes that create barriers to those of us with impairments, resulting in activity limitation. Disability, as a term, describes the outcome resulting from a form of prejudice, also referred to as ableism. In this diagram, we're drawing a parallel between the social model of disability and other forms of prejudice. People with certain characteristics, example, different ethnicities or sex, are grouped together and impacted by prejudice. Identity forms an intermediary between the characteristics of the group and the prejudice. The perpetrator of the prejudice, for example, racism, is the one labelled by the prejudice, or they're the racist. However, the reverse is true for disability. The challenge for us as Māori, forming a collective identity, or Māori with lived experience of disability, sits in the gap between the fragmented biomedical framing of impairment and a deficit paradigm of the prejudice. Next slide. Identity is multidimensional, dynamic, and shaped by life experiences and opportunities. Our qualitative interviews showed diverse perspectives amongst Māori with a range of differences, including impairment that originated from birth, sometimes seen as part of whakapapa, whereas others, for example, who may have acquired impairment later in life or following an accident, were less inclined to see themselves as disabled. Even within Te Ao Māori, there's a paradox between wanting to be seen as the same, to be included, but then at the same time, wanting to be different, to be counted and have recognition of different life experiences. In general, Māori often considered they had a medical health condition rather than a disability. And this was part of a product of the dominant global north and historic biomedical concepts of disability. Māori are not homogenous. There is no collective voice to describe disabled Māori. This requires collective identity. Next slide, please. So why is collective identity important for Māori? Well, Māori repeatedly tell us, I am first and foremost Māori. Having a disability is just part of who I am. And as I said, without a universal term to describe disability for Māori, we need to include this diversity that is there. It's primarily linked to Te Ao Māori, and disability may or may not even be relevant to one's identity. It's important to note there's a paradigmatic misalignment with the global north or the Western framing of disability and Indigenous identity. Hence, recent efforts to develop collective terms that are strengths-based, such as tāngata whaikaha Māori, which literally translates as people finding strength. And I want to just pause for a minute to honour the creator of this term, Mātua Mākatibble, who recently passed away, who was a leader, a kāpō Māori leader, and has set a huge pathway and groundwork for some of this work. A strong sense of cultural identity has been shown to be protective. It protects people who are in marginalised groups against the impacts of discrimination. So anyone who supports somebody's cultural identity is very, very important. Ka rangarua, ka rangamaha means two or many callings. Oh, next slide, please. The term describes the many roles that collectively contribute to Māori identity. And you can have a look at this iconic picture of Dame Whenekupa on her hikoi or land march in 1975. This is a visual representation of some of her many roles. She is arguably one of the most influential Māori leaders of our times, clearly a disabled wahine and a nanny to Moko Irene here in this photo. But Western-centric constructs of disability and health-related terms fail to align with Te Ao Māori perspectives. And Kirsten referred to it before, looking for the methodology. What is the methodology she was trying to use? Because there wasn't one that we could use. It hadn't been developed. So our research is focused on that with our community, with tāngata whaikaha Māori, with our colleagues, with our allies. And we have developed Ka Rangarua, Ka Rangamaha as a Māori disability framework to help understand ways of being, knowing, doing, and understanding the priorities and impacts of disability from Te Ao Māori. This framework supports tāngata whaikaha Māori to define their collective identity, to reclaim their own mātauranga, or their knowledge, and to acknowledge their rights to tino rangatiratanga. So I'll pass over next to Tristram, who's going to discuss the aspects of intersectionality. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Bernadette. Thank you for that. And I guess it's part of the discussion is really about how we define ourselves, how we even measure, how can we look at the phenomena affecting our community if we can't describe ourselves, if we don't have a collective identity, it makes it very difficult to show the impact. So next slide, please. I want to talk about intersectionality, which is the sociological analytical framework for understanding how groups and individuals result in unique combinations of discrimination or privilege. And so next slide. To do this, as part of our Te Ao Marama study, we use the Washington Group short set, and many people will be familiar with this, but not everyone is. So I will, I'll just go through it briefly. We recognise that this tool is not an adequate measure to describe or define tāngata whaikaha Māori. It's really a measure of activity limitation or functional impairment, not of identity. What it does do is it measures 6 basic universal actions and it assesses the extent of difficulty to which someone has completing that task, whether it be seeing, hearing, remembering, walking, climbing steps, or self-care, and asks to what extent is there difficulty? No difficulty, some, a lot, or they can't do it at all. And the international standard is to class disability as a lot of difficulty or cannot do at all. But given our earlier reference to the social model of disability, we're really going to just refer to this as WGS's positive, reflecting people with significant activity limitation, not to refer to this as a measure of disability, because it doesn't measure disability, nor does it measure prevalence of disability, despite the fact in many cases it's used in that way. What it is intended for is international and longitudinal comparative measures to identify a group, and it's a subgroup of those who are affected, but a subgroup who are at risk for poor outcomes in unaccommodating environments. And so what we can do, what this tool is useful for, is looking at environmental barriers, whether they be physical, social, cultural, civic participation, and identifying areas of society that are not inclusive to this group. Next slide, please. As part of the Te Ao Marama study, we undertook a comprehensive holistic survey of 7,230 adults of Māori descent from a random sample of the electoral roll, making this, to our surprise, the largest non-governmental study of Māori wellbeing outcomes ever conducted. 15.1% of these adults, which is over 1,000, approximately 1,091, met the criteria of at least a lot of difficulty to one or more of the 6 Washington Group short set questions. And today I want to run you through a few of the results from this analysis that we're currently in the process of publishing to highlight the intersectional impact of activity limitation over and above being Māori. So the comparison group in the tables I'm about to show you are Māori who do not have a significant activity limitation. And I think that's an important factor. And before going on, I wanted to explain that we've grouped our analysis into the domains of a holistic model of Māori health described by Tā Mason jury for health promotion called Te Pai Mahutanga, based on the Southern Cross constellation. And as we go through these domains, we'll hope you'll see that the impacts we highlight are wide-ranging, and this is the first time that this kind of holistic analysis of health and well-being has been presented disaggregated outcomes for tāngata whaikaha Māori. So Māori order, cultural identity. In this domain, we include various aspects of identity, such as cultural knowledge, practices, and language. But here, in the interest of time, I'm only showing you a couple of cultural practices to give an indication of the data. We noted significantly lower opportunity by Māori with significant activity limitation to be engaged in traditional healing practices or other marae-based activities. So the column I'm referring to is the WGSS positive. These are people with a lot of difficulty or could not do at all to any of the 6 Washington Group short set questions. 20% of Māori with significant activity limitations were able to take part in traditional healing practices or massage in the previous 12 months, compared to 49% of Māori without those same significant limitations. Similarly, 14% of Māori with significant activity limitation been involved in marae-based activities, compared to 46% without the same. These reflect a huge inequity in exposure to the protective effects of culture and social opportunity, and a multiplicative effect over and above the already well-described inequities and outcomes for Māori in general. Next slide, please. By order, environments, the flourishing of interconnectedness between people, environments, and here we've included well-being resources, such as physical resources, social resources, culture, and system. And I'm just showing one example here, a Likert scale of the result, how connected do you feel to your whānau, which demonstrates the Māori with significant activity limitation are less likely to report feeling very well connected, and more likely to report feeling not at all or not very well connected to whānau. Again, recognising the protective effects of whānau on well-being in general. Therefore, this is an important factor to have been identified. Next slide, please. Turning now to toi ora, or healthy lifestyles, in which we include measures of general health, well-being, life satisfaction, and self-reported disability. Here we are showing just the one domain. In general, would you say your health is poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent? And to show that the number of people with activity limitation reporting excellent health is only 3.8% compared to 11.3%. And very good, 13% versus 31.8%. So a significant difference in overall health as a result. Next slide, please. But thinking about intersectionality, this also translates into participation in society, te wārango. And here, the question we've selected to present today is about discrimination. Have you ever been discriminated against? 73.2% of people with significant activity limitation report ever discrimination, compared to 58.6% of other Māori. Among those groups, almost a third, 31.4% of Māori with activity limitation attribute that to being on the basis of a disability or a health issue, compared to just over 9% of other Māori. And interestingly, 69.5%, slightly fewer people with activity limitation report discrimination on the basis of race or ethnic group, compared to 76% of Māori without. And of course, the question there is about attribution, because this is a perception of the basis of discrimination. So it may be that people with a disability or health issue are more likely to attribute discrimination they face to that than to being Māori in general terms. Next slide, please. In the interest of time, we won't present the data here on social and professional leadership, but just to note, ngā manakura is also an important part of the model. The next slide, please. And the final domain, te mana whakahaere or autonomy, is a really important issue. In this domain, we include factors such as economic freedom and material well-being that act as the precursors to the fulfillment of autonomy and self-determination. And we address some of the consequences of the intersectional disadvantage resulting from prejudice and discrimination. We recognise that a person's autonomy and self-determination are necessarily constrained and contextualised by the resources and opportunities available to them. This table highlights the practical choices that whānau must make to live within their means, and the obvious downstream consequences that these constraints incur. So what does this show? Over half, 50.7% of Washington Group short set positive people, i.e. those with significant activity limitation, have gone without fresh fruit and vegetables in the previous 12 months to keep costs down, compared to 35% amongst those without the activity limitation. Look, even the latter figure is deeply concerning, how prevalent this is. But again, the inequity, the intersectional inequity, is striking. And the same trend occurs with the other measures of material well-being presented here. 59% of whānau with activity limitation postpone doctor's visits because of cost, compared to 38%. 73% of people with activity limitation postpone dental health, compared to 59%. And in terms of housing and heating, over half, that's 55%, put up with feeling cold to keep costs down, compared to 36% of their non-activity limited Māori peers. We're deeply humbled that we're able to shine a light by Te Ao Marama on these disaggregated data. To us, they highlight the fact that discrimination that is disability has pervasive effects across multiple elements of life outcomes, and those effects result in multiplicative disadvantage. None of these outcomes actually describe disability and the mechanisms by which disability has its action and by which the outcomes are perpetuated. But they do, however, reveal a clear need for greater recognition, collective voice, and collective identity in order to both claim the space and to actively engage in solutions to identify and address those specific mechanisms of prejudice. But referring back to the points Bernadette raised earlier about the practical and epistemological limitations of the Washington Group short set of questions for Māori, we've become very aware that these estimates are likely highly conservative. I'll hand over now to Meredith to explain how these data and insights have revealed to us significant structural issues that lead to the invisibilisation of the true impacts of these effects. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Tristram. So as Tristram mentioned, this next section is going to talk about invisibilisation and how the measures we use, or perhaps more precisely, how the application of categories or cut points can lead to invisibilisation of some people who experience activity limitations. Next slide, please, Umi. Could you press the button just to, it should just highlight column A. Yeah, perfect, thank you. So as we discussed earlier, the Washington Group short set has 6 questions with 4 potential responses, ranging from cannot do it all to no difficulty. This is what you see on this left handmost column, column A. The second column, column B, shows that split, that categorization of a lot of difficulty and cannot do it all to Washington Group short set positive, those that perhaps have more significant activity limitation, and those who perhaps don't, and that includes those with some difficulty and no difficulty. As Tristram mentioned, if you could click the button again, Umi, please. Currently, most analyses in New Zealand are collapsed into this definition of what we would term Washington Group short set positive and negative. Next button, please. So it is proposed that that kind of two-level categorisation, Washington Group short set positive and negative, would allow us to understand the impact of participation barriers for Māori with activity limitations. And this is not currently understood well in Aotearoa. So there is potentially a place for that kind of analysis. However, we actually think there could be an argument to consider whether we should group some difficulty with activity into the a lot and cannot do it all groups to create a group of any difficulty. And that is what you can see here in column C. This would enable an understanding of impact for any degree of activity limitation. Conversely, it's actually possible that this type of categorization would not enable us to differentiate the magnitude of impact between those with some and those with more substantive activity limitation. So maybe column D is the answer. Perhaps we should analyse some difficulty group separately from the Washington Group short set positive and the no difficulty group. This would allow us to see if the some difficulty group does experience barriers to participation. So we are wondering if the widely used two-level model of positive and negative to conduct analysis actually masks, invisibilizes the experiences of a group who do have some activity limitation. Could we please go to the next slide? In this next slide, we have the same 4 columns showing the different ways of categorizing those with an activity limitation. But here we present the percentage of Māori who reported an activity limitation from our survey. In column A, we can see that 1% of participants reported cannot do it all for any of the Washington Group short set questions. 14.1% reported a lot of difficulty, and a large 55.1% of the 7,230 participants reported some difficulty. Column B would show you what would happen to that data if we go to the two-level categorization into that Washington Group short set positive and negative. We now have the positive group with 15.1% of our study participants and the no difficulty group representing 74.5% of study participants. Means that this some difficulty group is effectively classified as no difficulty. Column C shows that reverse categorization with any difficulty representing some, a lot, and cannot do it all. If we went down this method of classification, this would represent 70.2% of our study population, and as alluded to earlier, would likely not enable differentiation of impact between people with more significant activity limitation. Finally, column D is what we suggest would be the most appropriate method to understand impact, with 15.1% of our study population still classified as Washington Group short set positive, and 55.2% being analysed separately as some difficulty. Could we go to the next slide, please, Umi? Oh, sorry, yep, just click through, yeah, thank you. So this slide shows 2 other outcomes that we measured from the STAR, Te Oranga, participation in society, and we were particularly asking about participation in healthcare, access to healthcare. And we chose these 2 outcomes as we had already identified that nearly 1/3 of all study participants reported having an unmet health need, with 33% citing the cost of access as being one of the key reasons. What you can see here in this table is that if you are Washington Group short set positive, a significantly higher percentage of people have unmet health need, with not being able to access a GP, nurse, or other healthcare professional within 24 hours, nor the ability to access professional help for emotional stress, mental health, or substance use. So the next slide, if we could go there, will present data for those 2 outcomes and compare the difference between classification B, that is, the 2-level classification, Washington Group short set positive and negative, and column D, which we are arguing is perhaps more helpful, the three-level categorization of Washington Group short set positive, some difficulty, and no difficulty. So what you can see here from this adjusted logistic regression is on the top line, the two-level classification. And you can see if you are Washington Group short set positive, so significant activity limitation, you have 1.28 times the odds of reporting difficulty accessing a GP, nurse, or other healthcare worker within the next 24 hours. But what is really fascinating is if we come down to this bottom half of the table where we've got the three levels, some difficulty is separated out from no difficulty. We can firstly see that the adjusted odds of unmet need increases to an odds of 1.91 for the Washington Group short set positive group. That is a lot of difficulty and cannot do it all. Secondly, we can observe that there is actually a significant impact for the some difficulty group compared to the no difficulty group 2, with this group having 1.67 times the odds of having difficulty accessing GP, nurse, or other healthcare worker. This really does suggest that the categorization of some difficulty group with no difficulty invisibilizes the participation barriers that this group experiences. Furthermore, when some difficulty is grouped with no difficulty, the increased variance within the no difficulty group actually minimizes the impact in the Washington Group short set positive group, those with more significant activity limitations. Next slide, please. The same pattern is seen here for the question, in the past 12 months, did you ever feel that you needed professional help for your emotions, stress, mental health, or substance use, but didn't receive that help? Notice the increase from the two-level categorization method with an adjusted odds ratio of 2.32, and then we compare that to the three-level, 3.98. Furthermore, the impact for those with some difficulty is not trivial. There is an adjusted odds ratio of 2.01. Next slide, please. So I've got the honour of concluding for all of us. Tāngata whaikaha Māori. Māori with lived experience of disability have diverse, multidimensional and dynamic identities, and that's been shaped by our experiences and, of course, society prejudices. There has been no opportunity to form a national collective identity as Tāngata whaikaha Māori to counter that individualistic deficit narrative from the global north. There really aren't any data collection tools that adequately capture collective identity, nor the socio-cultural context of disability. Existing tools are really poorly aligned with Tāngata whaikaha Māori concepts of holistic well-being and identity, and they have not been specifically designed with or validated for Māori. But the limited tools that we do have do illustrate the significant multidimensional impacts of societal prejudice and bias, racism, ableism, coloniality, and outcomes for Tāngata whaikaha Māori. We actually think from our data presented today that a lack of critical thinking in the application of these tools significantly invisibilizes the impact of disability amongst a very large proportion of the Māori population. Kia ora.
Ka pai. Wana nei koutou. I'm just going to move around. We have a few minutes for questions. We haven't got any on the line. People are obviously getting a bit tired. It's that mid-afternoon after you've had kai. I'm just going to come in. Oh, I missed it. Here we go.
Of 73% versus 58.6% respectively, gives 50.7% of whaikaha experiencing ethnicity attributed discrimination versus 44.5% in non-whaikaha Māori. If I done my math right. Does this reflect multiplicate disadvantage?
Is that understandable, Bernadette and Tristram and Meredith? Did you get that?
Kia ora. The two forms of discrimination that we listed there were among a list of about 8, and so they are independent questions that were asked of anyone who reported any form of discrimination. And what we can say is that clearly multiple people have experienced multiple of those different forms of discrimination. We haven't done a logistic regression to actually, or further analysis to identify whether there are clusters of people who have experienced only one form or another, or intersecting forms. That I think will be, some future work that we intend to do. But I just want to sort of highlight that it's very difficult to know what is the basis of a discrimination that you face. You either don't get the job, or you don't get the opportunity, or you get evicted from your property, or whatever it might be. There is an attribution that goes here, and is the fact that over 70% of Māori actually have activity limitation in our study. It's very difficult to tease out those discrimination. In fact, it's sort of leading us to think, to what extent is ableism and racism actually the same phenomenon in many cases? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Bernadette, Tristram and Meredith. It's Bridget here. Thank you for your amazing presentation as usual, and for your really important mahi in this area, and really look forward to all your amazing articles I'm sure that will be coming. But I guess I'm switching tack a little just to ask, you've highlighted the kind of lack of appropriateness or suitability of the tools when you went looking to utilize in this research. Is one of your future goals to develop something that is grounded in Te Ao Māori and as you're able to use more effectively and appropriately for this kind of research?
Yes, you're exactly right. That's really what's needed. And in setting up the study, we looked a lot at the kupu, or the terminology, and you might recall that we came to you because we, people with neurodiversity aren't really measured very well, particularly if you're Māori and you're neurodiverse, learning disability, weren't captured very well. And we asked for Indigenous models of measuring these group of people, and they're not there. As far as we could see, they're not there. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area. We, as part of this large national survey, we have collected different forms, many different forms of kupu, and that will be one of our jobs next year, to do some more analysis on those terms. There is no one term that we can use. I really want to reiterate that. So we'll keep you updated on how we get on. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, Bridget. And just to add to what Bernadette's saying, we did a whole qualitative phase to proceed this survey to try and understand from tāngata whaikaha Māori how they would like to be identified. We could not get a collective view. There was such diversity, as Bernadette mentioned. between different types of impairment, different mechanisms of acquiring impairment, length of having impairment, whether disability, quote unquote, was acting as a culture, like a kaupapa whānau. We have seen that. We do see the elements of people finding collective strength through their tāngata whaikaha Māori communities, like Tangata Tūri or the Māori deaf community, etc. So what we've taken as an approach, our initial presentation is using what is the generic global north framing, the Washington Group short set. But we've collected, as Bernadette said, a range of kupu. We've collected other sort of forms of data in terms of general health, mental health, physical health kind of parameters. What we do believe more work is needed is around a national corridor around collective identity. Without that collective identity, we are forever going to be siloed groups of different impairments. And I think there's been quite a bit of colonial assimilation that's gone into this process. And actually, very few people actually referred to themselves in the kupu by one of the collective terms, like tāngata whaikaha, Māori, whānau, hawa. They really referred to themselves in terms of, I've got epilepsy or a dicky hip or I've had an amputation. And so it's very difficult to even describe the cohort that we're looking to form a collective identity with. And that's why we've taken that sort of initial framing of activity limitation, being the group that really needs to be engaged in a broader term to start forming that identity. People that don't already identify as disabled but clearly have that kind of are at risk in that way. And data from the Health Quality Safety Commission Primary Health Survey showed a really low correlation in general population between the Washington Group short set responses and a self-identity question. Something like only 50% overlap between those two questions. And that's even more so in Māori, tāngata whaikaha Māori, where that more included collective viewpoint has pervaded. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Tristram, Bernadette and Meredith. We are at time and we're starting to lose people because they're heading off to their other mahi. So we will sadly say farewell, but thank you so much. I'm going to turn, here I am, I'm going to turn so the people online can see me, and gosh, I'm going to have to go down again. This is Yoga 303. But also thank you to our other speakers, to Kirsten Smiler and Louise Were. Thank you also to the Critical Disability Research Network for supporting this. Also to Otākou Whakaihu Waka, to the Division of Humanities, to Professor Ruth Fitzgerald, who I have a special connection with, and I'll tell those later, but I am very grateful to her for getting me to be a doctor today, and also to Ricky Kiwini for all the logistics, helping all our speakers, including myself, to be with you, to the DBI staff, that's the Donald Beasley Institute, who supported everything else, and particularly to Umi Asaka and to Bridget Murphy-Veach for their mahi in pulling this all together. And to everybody who's in the room, as well as those online, he mihi nui kia koutou. Please join us on the 8th of November for the second of this 4-part series, which we will be doing. The presentation will be on disability, violence and abuse, a social ecological model for prevention with and for disabled people. And that will be from 12 to 2, same time, same place, and we'll be having speakers with Professor Nancy Fitzsimmons from the Minnesota State University, and also Associate Professor Patsy Frawley, the University of New South Wales. So I'm going to wrap up very quickly with a karakia and bid you all farewell. Thank you very much to our interpreters today who have been brilliant, and it must be extremely exhausting. So I mihi to you both. He karakia ki te whakakapi tēnei wānanga, ki tēnei wānaka I tēnei wā. Te whakaeatanga te whakaeatanga Tēnei te kaupapa kaia. Tēnei te wānanga kaia. Te Māori o te kaupapa ka whakamoia. Te Māori o te wānanga ka whakamoia. Koa ki runga, koa ki raro. Ti hei Māori ora. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Kia ora.